Right, so hi, I'm Holly. I am a Microsoft software engineer on the Cortana and Windows team, and I'm also the creator of Her Hello World, a place where I work to dispel the myths of technology and really help mentor people in having a successful career in tech. Today, I'm going to be talking about overcoming imposter syndrome whilst moving towards success. Now, I want to start by kind of breaking down what imposter syndrome really is. Imposter syndrome is the feeling or idea that you've only succeeded due to luck, not because of your qualifications or your talents. For me, it really feels like a crisis of confidence. Now, 70% of people have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. And that means the people that you work with and the people that you look up to have likely experienced or struggled with imposter syndrome before, or even are working through it now. Now, imposter syndrome, of course, can affect anyone, men and women, and common patterns have been found between people who experience imposter syndrome. Now we have like perfectionists who set a really, really high bar for themselves, and any mistake can kind of make them question their capabilities. You have your experts that feel like they need to know everything before they speak up, apply for a job, and hesitate even to ask questions in fear of looking like they don't have all the answers. Now, natural geniuses feel like if they struggle to pick up something new, they aren't good enough and that they are an imposter. Soloists feel like they have to accomplish tasks on their own, and if they ask for help, then they're a failure or a fraud. And now superhumans feel like they have to push themselves harder than anyone else just to prove that they aren't imposters. They must succeed in all aspects of their lives, and this may lead to them feeling stressed or overwhelmed if they aren't accomplishing something. Now, I want to ask you, like, how many of these traits do you identify with? Do you relate with? Because these things come up time and time again in different studies and self-development books, and they really build on this narrative that imposter syndrome is highly prevalent and in our society and really common amongst people. So my journey, imposter syndrome, has really stemmed from two places, the individual and community. The individual, I lack confidence and trust in my abilities as a developer, and that I would overcome challenges that I was not an expert in. Externally, many of us, especially as women in male-dominated industries, have experienced a lot of, or like a lack of community confidence. It's a sense of belonging that can be hard to find when people around you don't look like you or have the same experiences about you, especially when there are stereotypes about your confidence in that group. It can often feel like, as women, we don't have the same inherent trust that comes with being a man in a male-dominant industry. And these feelings of limited trust and community can lead to feeling like an imposter. Now, Deborah Frances White and her book, The Guilty Feminist, sort of analyzes broader community confidence, where she puts tribal confidence in more depth. So I definitely take a read of that book and even a listen of her podcast. It's really, really interesting. Now, as I tell you my story, you're going to see how these two sources of imposter syndrome have cropped up and what I've really done to kind of overcome my imposter syndrome, or really rather learned to control it. So now Act 1 is all about my education. We're starting from the beginning. So I've really been interested in technology from a very young age. It was really playing games with my dad that helped me imagine the infinite possibilities of tech. And when I got older, I decided to take a games programming camp at DigiPenn University. This was my first time programming, and I was one of maybe only two girls in the class. And I was definitely the least experienced programmer. We were programming in C++, which I'm sure some of you know is not the easiest language to learn, but the boys seemed to just do fine. Many of them had previous development experience, and they had really been reinforced by society that technology was an industry where they would be welcomed. Conversely, I felt really out of my depth and that I couldn't really identify with anyone in the classroom. The lack of female representation and my own limited development knowledge was a combination of individual and community triggers that kind of made me immediately feel like an imposter. But I couldn't give up though, and so I latched onto something that I loved. If you've heard the Catherine Tate show, it's an English program from ages ago. And I ended up making my first game based on one of her sketches. So I left the camp feeling really proud that I'd made my game, even though it was really basic. But I definitely felt and questioned whether or not I was going to program again. And so really, I had to evaluate myself and understand that technology was my passion. And so I gave it another shot. I took Java and web development classes in high school. But again, I was only one of a few women. I definitely grasped programming much better this time, but it was still really challenging. There was days that I definitely gave into my imposter syndrome and would end up in tears. I get really down if my code didn't work or that I didn't come up with a solution quick enough. And I'd ask myself, like, why is tech so hard for me? But mostly, I just never felt like I'd caught up. There was always something else to learn. I know many of us will have had teachers that have really stand out or changed our lives. And mine was my first computer science teacher in high school. He sat with me every single time that I got frustrated and worked through the problem with me and really made sure I understood what was happening. He made me feel like I wasn't alone, and he reminded me that I was making progress. And so he said something to me that really stuck with me. He said, stop and think about all the things that you've learned. I remind myself this every single time I'm falling behind. Often in tech, it moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We're always learning, and often we forget just how much we've learned and how far we've come. So I take the time to really remind myself of the time that I didn't even know my most foundational knowledge in the subject and look just how far I've come since then. This was my first lesson in how to overcome imposter syndrome. And it was years later that I learned how to even refine this message, which I'll speak about later. For now, though, I really do have my computer science teacher to thank for helping me discover my love of programming and get me started on this journey where I am now. So Act 2, placement. So I've dreamed of working at Microsoft for my entire life. I was a girl out on the recess field preaching about how the Zune was better than the iPod. And so I moved to the UK from Seattle to study computer science and business. And during my placement year, which I worked really hard to get because I really wanted to be in the running to be a software engineering intern at Microsoft. It was definitely the most amount of work I've put into something, and I had to stay really focused. But I did it, and honestly, I couldn't believe at the time when I got my email that said, "Congratulations, I got the job." But it was around that time the excitement kind of quickly turned into fears and doubts that were kind of creeping in. My placement year during university was probably when my imposter syndrome was at its worst, but it also taught me the most about myself and my motivations. So my first day as an intern was on Paint 3D when I met all of these incredible developers, many of whom actually wrote the games that inspired me to enter tech in the first place. I was fangirling really hard. Everyone was super talented and had just decades of experience over me. And I ended up comparing myself to everyone else, and I immediately felt like, wow, I must be a diversity hire. How could I have someone from a normal university possibly be out just thousands of applicants and gotten a job at Microsoft? After even a couple work drinks on our first week, like first Friday team drinks, I even asked my hiring manager why he hired me. This question really plagued my mind. But over the next year, I'd really learned to kind of overcome or really manage my imposter syndrome. And my solution sort of took like a three-pronged approach. It was about building skills, growing my individual confidence, and establishing this community confidence. So I knew I was never going to feel better if I didn't have the technical skills. And so this really became a focus of mine. And I was in the perfect place to really do just that. I had feared showing people that I didn't know something, but I had changed my perspective to see those who had previously intimidated me for being experts in their field into assets that I could learn from. I reminded myself that even the smartest people had to ask the same questions I am now to get to where they are today. And it really came down to adopting a growth mindset. No one is born with industry knowledge or skills. Don't be afraid to ask for help and to use your resources. This is why you are on a team, and often asking other people's help is great because their progression is reliant on helping others. So by helping yourself, you are helping them. And the next step for me was to really learn to trust myself and build confidence. Easy, right? Um, I'd say the best kind of generic personal or career development advice is to find a mentor. I was incredibly fortunate to have amazing mentors who were huge supporters of mine. And they both helped me in different ways. One of them helped with my technical and career development, and the other helped me with navigating tech as a woman. But both of them helped me with their imposter syndrome by sharing their stories with me. They shared about how when they were in my position, it took months for them to ramp up and they faced the same setbacks. I was able to share what I was going through openly and candidly. And in some ways, they probably knew myself better than even like my friends and even me. Their mentorship really reassured me, though, that I was on the right track. And they were proof that the people who I aspire to be were able to overcome similar challenges. And now, while my mentors could reassure my rational brain, the most impactful change was going to happen from within. When I was given a new task, I always thought to myself, I was like, oh gosh, I was like, I have no idea how to do this. There's no answers sheet. This was really me diving into unknown territory. But my mentor always was so assured that we could find a solution. Knowing my mentor's story and being able to like identify with me made me kind of start to emulate their confidence, even if I wasn't feeling confident at the time. And after completing a few challenges and critical path tasks, I started to realize that all of these problems are solvable and that I really could do it. I began proving to myself that even if I wasn't sure myself or didn't know the solution, I could learn and deliver a great feature. It was proving to myself and reassured my heart that gave me the confidence that I really needed. And so while I had my mentors looking out for me, I wanted to make sure I was viewed as a full member of the team and not just an intern. I wanted to make my mark on the product. And so I built my community confidence by taking on these critical path tasks that were more visible to the leads and the wider team. My keenness to take on these projects really stood out. And it helped me become a central team member and build a reputation. This was really possible, though, because I first learned to have trust in myself and trust in my engineering ability. And in turn, my growth and community confidence from working on critical paths was built. And I had been able to prove that I could complete this important work, and it built my skills in working on new and different tasks. So by the time I left Paint 3D at the end of my placement year, I had absolutely transformed. There were times during my placement where I felt completely overwhelmed and that Microsoft had made a mistake in hiring me. But at the end, I had come into my own. I had proven to myself that I could do it. And at which point, I decided to move back to Seattle to work on Xbox's off-console experiences. And a whole new opportunity led to a new inner critic challenge. I immediately noticed that a lot of the other interns and full-time employees came from just the most best prestigious universities in the country and abroad. In my intern group alone, there were 3 guys from Harvard, and it seemed just like Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon were just your run-of-the-mill universities and HQ. I definitely felt my imposter syndrome coming back, and I returned to those lessons that I had learned so many years ago. I had to remind myself of my own success, but more than that, I had to remind myself that I'm on my own journey, with my own skills and experiences that make me valuable. While I didn't go to the top computer science university in the country, I had extended job experience and had shipped a product. Our stories are unique. The obstacles, opportunities, and motivations will be different from others. We need to have confidence that you are capable and you're making progress towards your own version of success. And once I started to own my journey, I was better able to identify where I could apply my unique talents and create a greater impact on the company. Facing the imposter in me has helped get me to know myself, and in some ways, it forced self-reflection. I'm learning what is important to me, how I work best, the areas in which I should focus my development on, and recognize where my USPs can help myself and my whole company progress. And now Act 3, the real world. This is my current act. I'm still learning every day, still battling my inner critic on my bad days. I mean, I'm still striving to make change in the world through the technology. So post-university, I rejoined my London team to work on Cortana and Windows. I was super excited because I love my job, I love my team, but as ever, a new challenge meant a new twist on the imposter. My imposter syndrome told me now it was like I really needed to prove myself. I was no longer protected by my intern status, and it felt like make it or break it. I started comparing myself again to everyone else. Was I smarter as them? Was I producing as much work as them? Would I have been able to find a solution for that? And I decided to get ahead of my imposter syndrome and take action to make sure that it didn't get the same control over me as it did during my placement year. I'm taking inspiration from my first lesson of reminding yourself of your own growth and success. I decided to get organized, and I created a new OneNote notebook of tabs that represented each week's lessons, like technical and career, and when to apply this information. This exercise serves as a resource, but more importantly, it serves as a visual reminder of just how much you've learned since I was working, and just how much you've learned since, and how much you've grown. As my confidence and skills have grown, this round of imposter syndrome has subsided. This technique really allows me to put my comparer inner critic aside and focus on my growth and journey in a productive way. Now, these last few years have been all about building my industry engagement and my individual confidence. And nothing builds confidence like doing something you're terrified of. So when I was younger, I would actively avoid public speaking. My first time public speaking, I was almost ill. This fear I knew I needed to get over. My desire to support women in STEM and to one day be a lead at Microsoft motivated me to overcome this fear. I started by taking baby steps, by doing university tours, and then talking to prospective CS students, and ramping up by giving talks to Microsoft student partners and being on panels, and even talking now to speaking at a Microsoft conference where I gave this presentation the first time. You would have never have convinced me that I would have chosen to start publicly speaking when I was younger. But here I am, and I have all of you who are listening to thank for helping me squash my inner critic. Pushing yourself to do things that you wouldn't have normally done can be really scary and stressful, but the rush after completing it is so powerful. These things give me the confidence to take the next steps that scare me and ignore my inner critic that tell me that I won't succeed. Now, learning to overcome your imposter syndrome is an iterative process, and one that may never go away. As you saw in my journey, every new phase of my life or career opportunity brought on a new form of my imposter. But we can learn to remove its control over us with a conscious mindset changes and actions. The most powerful and impactful change is going to come from within you. When you feel your imposter syndrome coming back, return to those 3 prongs. Build your skills, increase your individual confidence, and establish your community confidence. When your inner critic surfaces, so you can manage those negative thoughts while still moving towards success. Now, today I've decided to be vulnerable in front of my peers and tell you that none of us are alone. My final lesson today is really a call to action. Help the next person feel like they belong and build their community confidence by sharing your story. My mentors who are vulnerable with me made me feel like I wasn't behind, alone, and that I wouldn't be stuck feeling like this forever. Talking about them and owning them takes the sting out of the stigma. We need to build an industry together where we can succeed and not be brought down by our own self-doubt. So I want to say a massive thank you for listening to me. I hope you've gotten something valuable out of this by hearing my story and learning about the lessons that I've gotten along the way. Please do get in touch with me, hear all my details. It would be great to hear about your own experiences with imposter syndrome and the lessons that you've learned as well. Thank you very much.